Alrighty. Hello, everyone. We are live. It is Friday, August 28th. You are hanging out with my community manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. Thank you so much for taking part of your day and spending it here with us. We have a fantastic panel today. We are going to be talking about de-escalation, which is pretty awesome. We've got a great panel, so I'm going to intro this really quick and get to it because these people are very smart and I'm excited to learn from them. Hello everyone on Twitter as well. If you guys are hanging out with Carrie and Sarah over there, awesome. Hashtag joining in. Really sweet. So, building community, it's a never-ending test on your interpersonal communication skills. We often have the chance to spotlight and celebrate with those who are thriving in our communities. We also have moments where sometimes difficult conversations happen and they're required. So mastering that skill of de-escalation and conflict is super crucial to success and to community management. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's go through an intro, starting with Tim.
Awesome. Thanks, Dom. Tim McDonald. I am Purveyor of Purpose at Be the Change Revolutions, co-founder of Creating Is, and formerly the Director of Community at the Huffington Post, which I think gave me most of my experience for learning how to de-escalate some conversations and conflicts with our community over there. So looking forward to the talk.
True to form, Sherry hasn't found the unmute button yet.
Sorry, guys. Hey, everyone. I'm Sherry Rohde, and I'm the community manager at Magento, as well as co-producer and co-host here at CMGR Hangout.
Hey, everybody. I'm David Dewald, community manager at Bit9 Carbon Black, frequent contributor to the Google Hangouts.
And the most awesome hat for today, David.
I thought it was appropriate.
Hey guys, it's Brock. Shocker, it's my first one, community manager hangout. No, I've been on these ones for a while, and I love joining you guys every week. I'm Brock DC on Twitter and basically all over the web, and I manage and help manage a few communities all around. So glad to be here talking to you guys again.
Hey everybody, my name's Alan Bush. I am a community manager at Rackspace, and this is my second time to be on the show, which is really cool. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I am Dom, community manager at Be the Change Revolutions, as well as co-host here with Sherry and Brew, taking over the question duties as Brew is somewhere else. So if you're listening, blow up his Twitter feed and send him lots of love, because he's in meetings all day. So let's get right to it. Question number one for you guys. What are some key triggers for difficult conversations in community building?
Anything that involves change. Really short and simple, but that was exactly what, whenever anything changed or was about to, we knew it was going to be conflict with somebody, because it's just like when Facebook makes a change in policy, everybody gets pissed off and then dies down and they get good and then they make another change. So simply change is a trigger for conflict.
Have you noticed that it's external and internal? Like, I noticed that within communities I've run in the past and current communities, that making big changes sometimes gets a lot of pushback from management and such too.
Oh no, I think absolutely you know, and as the community manager, you're stuck on both sides, because you're hearing the internal stuff and then you're having to deal with the external community. So I mean, absolutely, whenever you're dealing with change, I think it's the internal conflict, because you have different parties, different stakeholders that are all interested in it, and their own interest in how it's going to affect them. Nobody's going to be all on the same page, and then once you finally come to a conclusion of how you're going to move forward, then you present that to the community, and then you're going to get the conflict on that end. So definitely agree with you on that, David.
I agree with.
Go on, Brock.
I was just going to say, I agree with both of you guys. It's been interesting because I've worked with a lot of different communities where it's B2C, B2B, product focused, service focused, tech focused, whatever it is, and it's always the change. It's whether you're launching a new product or when I worked with Fluke, we've had tools that have been around for years, and like as soon as we wanted to retire something and in search of a new tool that was better and cheaper, even that, like, just people freaked out over it, and I was like, no, we're making it better for you guys. It's good. It's good change. It's all right. You can do it. So, yeah, I totally agree with you guys.
So I was going to mention that we've used our community here at Rackspace a lot of times to be the bearer of bad news, specifically with some security vulnerabilities that we've come across that would potentially be really bad if we didn't take care of them. So we've used that to kind of communicate things out to people. So I mean, that's where you get a lot of things. That is a major change because we're changing from hey, your server's on to your server's going to be off for a minute. And people don't like that very much. And so having that be the the entire target for that, you get a lot of people that are responding to that change, to that downtime, to that really bad news, unfortunately. So we've seen a little bit of that, unfortunately, but it's also a great way to work with to work with the customers and to show them some different ways that they can be more resilient to those changes, right? To make them less impactful. But a lot of times it's just being afraid and not knowing what's going to happen, and so we found that hey, let's share as much information as we can. Let's be transparent about what's going to happen, and that's going to really allow people to know and to lose some of that fear.
What else have you guys seen as triggers besides change management? Like, has moderation triggered a lot of difficult conversations or anything along those lines?
Yeah, actually, so the Google Small Business Community, we started from scratch and we set the guidelines way in the beginning before we even launched it. And whenever we've actually had, sometimes a moderator will respond to a post, we'll either keep it up or we'll have to remove it, and it's actually triggered some really good conversations and out of conflict on, as our community has grown, on how to deal with certain posts and that evolve, and how to actually evolve our voice and how we are talking to people as we're moderating. So our language, like our guidelines, have stayed pretty much the same, but our language has developed, so our responses and everything, especially as we bring on new moderators, have grown with the conflict, and it's actually led to really, really good growth. So we definitely keep that in mind as well when we're thinking about change and conflict.
Good stuff. Allie, you just jumped in, so you can introduce yourself. Do you have anything to add to Q1 or what we were just talking about?
Should I introduce myself or answer your question? I'll do both. So hi, my name's Allie. I'm in San Francisco right now in Zumper HQ. Zumper is an find and rent apartments, so that's where I am right now, and I'm running community city marketing. I have some experience before this doing a little bit more online community management and kind of facing a little more situations like the ones they're talking about than I do now. But I think that definitely in my experience, kind of the biggest trigger has definitely been moderation and having to be that person who comes in and like, this can't be happening right now, and I think that, obviously about kind of how you approach the first action. And I have a couple of words that you could see.
Okay. So let's roll into question 2. Obviously, it's kind of a given that you need to listen when it comes to this. When it comes to de-escalation. But how have you guys really seen listening play a role in de-escalation?
Oh, it's a you absolutely have to listen. Like you can't fake listen. You have to listen. You have to actively listen and just acknowledge that you hear what the customer is saying. I mean, it's 100% of the time it will play a role in de-escalation. It might not completely de-escalate the thing, but a lot of times people just want to be heard. They want to express their opinion. They might. The neat thing about when somebody has a strong opinion, right? They is because they are invested in the community. They want something to be good, especially in this context of change management, right? And oh, I don't want this thing to change. If people aren't engaged, they're not going to have anything to say about that. And those are the ones that are probably at risk of filtering out of your community or at losing interest. And those that have something to say, they're actually engaged in it, and those are the ones that you really do need to listen to and at least hear them out.
Yeah, and if you're listening ahead of time, you're not just reacting to an issue being escalated. You are proactively, you know what's going to come, whether it's been, like the example I'm going to keep using is like a product launch, a new product launch. And you know in the past that people have responded in certain ways, and these are the issues that they brought up. So you can anticipate the issues that might come up, so you are proactively de-escalating a situation in the right direction versus just a canned response or a canned way to de-escalate a situation. So you are making sure that the people in your community are being heard, they're being felt like they're heard, and they feel like they had a hand and they had a voice in the changes that came across, and you're communicating that with them. So I think, yes, we all have to listen, but we also have to apply the things that we learned while we were listening to the way we communicate the changes and the different things that are coming up, and in the way that we manage de-escalation.
And I was going to say, I think, there's a big distinction between listening and hearing somebody, because, at HuffPost, they had the comment platform where they could be heard, but until we actually took the time to acknowledge the fact that they were speaking, acknowledge what their concerns were, that's when they truly felt that we were listening to them. And that in itself, I think was so impactful, because especially like the community I was involved with there, it was nobody knew anybody. It was just Huffington Post, this big, big banner, but nobody knew who was behind Huffington Post, except for Ariana. And so when you got the opportunity to actually reach out and connect with one of these community members one-on-one on the telephone, it was so impactful to them just to actually sit and listen to what they had to say instead of just reading their comments and responding on the comment platform. So I think that's a huge element to really helping you get one step closer to resolution. I don't think it's always the resolution, but it's the first step in getting to one.
And I think that's the secret, is that much of online is anonymized. And by picking up the phone and talking to somebody, you've unmasked them in a way, right? So they can't hide behind that anonymity online. They hear your voice. They know you're a real person. They can hear your emotions and your inflections, and that usually goes a long way to deflating whatever hostilities or anger or upset, because they now realize that there's somebody on the other end. They're not talking into a void. And that their words are being heard, but they also can have impact on that person if they're overtly cruel or harsh.
And that's sort of a tactic that you have as well, like as you're talking with somebody, like to show that they are being heard. And it also helps you with listening is just repeating what somebody is saying back to them. It's one of those things, like as they're saying that they have a problem, it's like, all right, so you're saying, and then parrot it right back. And so what I think that means is, X, Y, Z. Not only are you making sure that they understand that they are hearing their words back to them, but then at the same time, it helps get rid of any questions that are going on, which also helps with de-escalation, because you don't want to take your time and energy and go moving towards some sort of what you think is a resolution that's actually not a resolution for them. You want to make sure that you keep it nice and clear in that way too. So. Alrighty. Well, hard transition number 3. We'll go right into the third
No.
question.
I can give us a smooth transition, right?
All right, transition it.
All right. So, we're talking about listening and, using de-escalation, stuff like that. There's certainly some psychology in there, and all community managers are either junior psychologists, budding psychologists, or they're working towards that degree, right? Um, through this life most of the time, or hard knocks. But part of that psychology is understanding, how we present ourselves to people. There's your transition.
So speaking of that and how we actually present ourselves, what are what helps you guys remember to control your tone, control your body language when you are having a difficult conversation?
Well, I'm fortunate in that I'm a pretty mellow dude, and it takes a very lot to get me upset and angry. God help you if you do, though. But for me, I find that mirroring people works really well. Like, you know, it's and this is again a psychological thing, right? So if you shake your head yes, people tend to shake their heads yes with you. So if you tend to mirror their actions, that gives them a perception that you're on the same wavelength, and you're communicating well. So if they're nodding their head yes, you nod your head yes too, and you get that rapport going through your body language. And I think that goes a long way to helping them and helping you. If you just remember to kind of, if they're upset, you try to remain calm, and if they start shaking their head yes, you shake your head yes, and mirror their actions, and that helps a lot. At least it has for me in the past. It might be a little deceptive. You might want to wring their neck, but
I would definitely echo that. I think that that's really good advice. I remember, I don't know if anybody here was at the first CMX in San Francisco when Robin Dreek from the FBI spoke, and he talked about kind of like having these conversations with people where you need to like get them basically to do something that you want to do that they don't want to do. And one of the biggest things he mentioned was this whole like mirroring technique, in the whole conversation in the context of that person rather in the context of yourself. So like, kind of framing it as like this, like what benefit they will ultimately get out of this situation, even though it feels negative to them right now, and kind of taking like what the message you're trying to convey and put it in the context of like why they should care about it. And I think that was like kind of off of the point of the mirror situation, but kind of your side of it in a context of the other person, I think is a really useful technique.
Yeah, one of the things. So my background is in customer service. Like my first job was Kmart. So I dealt with a lot of difficult people who came in and wanted to take out their grievances on the young kid who was behind the customer service desk. So one of the first things I learned that I've used when it comes to community management is remembering that it's not personal. You are the person that is dealing with it at that moment, but their grievances are not against you. You are just the person that they are able to take it out on or talk to because you're right there. And it's the same as community managers because we're the face of the community that we're managing. So we are the people that our customers, our members, whoever it is that's in our community, will ping first or will talk to first. And if they're frustrated, it'll sometimes feel like it's personal. And I've had situations where I'm super grateful that I have time to read something, put myself in their shoes, and figure out what they're going through, and remembering that they're not personally attacking me. And that's huge. And it's the same as in person too. So even if you don't have that time to kind of take a beat before you react and reply, and it's in person and face to face, it's the same thing as taking like a deep breath and just remembering that they're not attacking you personally. They're just frustrated about something. And it goes back to empathy, it goes back to listening and the mirroring technique. But I think the first thing that we all sometimes forget because we're so involved in it is we are representing the community, but the problems that they're having is not because of us. They're not attacking us personally, and that helps a huge ton in dealing with any kind of situation that needs to be de-escalated.
And I
I'm
think
gonna. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just. Oh,
ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things that I learned early on before we even had computers, or at least computers that we had in our homes, that's how old I am, was that I always was told if you're talking to somebody on the telephone, especially like in a customer service role or a sales role, put a mirror up in front of you and see your facial expression, see how you look, because that's how your voice is going to come across to the other person. I don't have a mirror up in front of me anymore, but I can tell. I mean, that's why I try and always smile, is because I know that's how I want to portray this open and friendly and receiving place so that it helps. But it's not always that easy, especially when you're in conflict. And so what I've really found is the easiest way for me personally to handle it is just to remember to keep that smile, and if I see it going away, take that deep breath and just relax and calm myself back down to that place of being centered, where I can actually understand and listen to this person for what they have to say, not how they're making me feel.
Yeah, and sort of just to echo what you were saying and to echo what Alan said earlier and to straight up steal a line from David, because when I heard it, I mean, I always remember this. A lot of times these people that are yelling at you, that are super passionate, they are really, they love the community, they love the product, they just have a horrible way of showing it, is what David always says. And so I always try to remember that when somebody is just like absolutely blasting online, just to have that sort of a thought process of just going, you know what, they suck at expressing this, like they could use different words and do it a lot nicer, but at the same time it's like just reminding yourself, hey, they're doing it because they actually care, like you don't.
It takes effort, right? I mean, it takes effort to go off and unload on somebody. You have to put some thought into it. So that's some serious passion there, right? I mean, you've got to think about just how you want to rip them a new one before you do it. So, that's passion you can channel and make it work for you.
I feel like an element of this is that, as like a community manager, most of the people you're hearing from, they say like, when people love something, but then when they hate something, they never shut up about it. And I think in my experience, at least, I definitely feel like that's true. So I feel like, if people are happy, but if they're not happy, then that's when they start talking to you. So I feel like these situations actually kind of come up more often than not, because and to not just reach out to tell you that they're happy, What I was going to say before was, do you guys have any tips or mechanisms or whatever to kind of remove yourself from the situation, kind of echoing what Barack was saying before, but kind of remember that they're not actually mad at you and it's not personal. But I know, especially from my experience, this is something that I really struggle with. I take everything personally, and I think it has showed in a very positive way in a lot of my work, but at the same time, I also tend to take a lot of negative things personally as well, and I have a hard time separating that. So, and I'm sure a lot of other people watching have experienced feelings with you guys. Any just tips and stuff how you remove no element.
So, for me to kind of help me to not take it personally is to practice empathy, and that's something that's been said quite a bit here and on the Twitter stream as well. Lots of talk about empathy, and that's huge, to be able to put yourself into their shoes and just to say, okay, I understand that they are why they're upset, and try to understand exactly what's going on there. The other thing there is just to remember that you are that's kind of your job, and it's a good job to have because you can really understand your customers and your community, and to understand what they're going through, and it gives you a lot of insight on how you can continue to be helpful and serve them in better ways. And so just use that and try to turn it into a positive light and say, yeah, I am getting the brunt of this, but it's also allowing me to understand what our community wants and what problems they're having, and maybe I can find a new way to implement a new feature, change the way that we handle a different procedure, and really try to turn it into a positive every time you can. That's been helpful for me.
Yeah, one of the ways been able to kind of, because I mean, I've had bad days where like I've totally taken it personally, haven't been able to deal with it, or had to take a step back. Talking with your manager or your teammates to just kind of do a gut check with them and say, hey, so we had this situation, this is how we dealt with it, this is how I was feeling through it, like, what do you guys think? That internal communication also really helps because it gives you outside perspective that's outside of you of the situation that's been going on with the people who have as much investment in it as you do. So having a good team, it's been like when I was a sole community manager because I was working with a startup and I didn't have a team because I was a freelancer and they were my client, I didn't have that kind of gut check. But like internally, but I have friends who have been doing it longer than me, and kind of like with Tim and Sherry and Dom and anybody that's on this panel that have that kind of experience, to have kind of mentorship where you can do a gut check and be like, God, this happened today, and this is how I was feeling with it, and this is how we dealt with it, but I'm not quite sure. That's always super helpful, and it gives you better perspective, and it always helps to talk it out and just kind of help you grow with how to deal with, because we all have bad days. I've had bad days where I took everything personally and had to deal with that and kind of internalize it. So I think having mentors around and doing the gut check definitely helps.
Yeah, definitely having somebody that can talk you down if you get really agitated is a very good thing. I know I've had situations where I've had to go and say, okay, just let me rant for a minute, and then get it out of my system, and then it's easier to go back to the community.
Just make sure you're doing it internally and not on Twitter.
Exactly.
Private conversations. Private.
I think that brings in a good spot to ask this one. Thanks, Laura, for hanging out with us. Let's see. Do you have a lot of de-escalating issues with your community? I think Laura's just trying to get some context. If you guys can sort of jump in, like, how often do you guys really have to go about this? Like, how often do you have, like, de-escalation issues?
It depends on the community. I think that in most B2B communities, they tend to be very, their business rules and your business rules tend to generally coincide, and you never really have situations where it gets too out of hand, where you really have to go in and de-escalate. I mean, you might have situations where you need to, put out a few fires, but never de-escalate. Sometimes in B2C, I think the customers, again, a little bit of anonymity, and they tend to think they can do whatever they want and say whatever they want. You'll run into it more. Personally, I found that in B2B, it tends to be much less. And it depends on what industry you're in B2C. In the gaming industry, I can tell you it's brutal. They don't mind telling you exactly how bad you're doing your job and how much better they could do it, and publishing your information online to get people to hunt you down. But in other industries, it's not nearly that bad.
And I think it also depends on the role that the community manager plays too. I mean, because you're responsible for moderation, for customer service, for customer experience, you're probably going to have a lot more issues than if you're just doing marketing. Because typically marketing just passes it over to a customer experience person if you're in that role. So like with our clients now, even though they're B2C, most of those just go through to the client for them to handle. But when I was at HuffPost, I mean, I would say de-escalation of conflict was my primary function. That's when I got involved. I had the team of moderators, but if it got to the point where it needed to be de-escalated, that's where I came in. So it was a huge part then, very little part now.
I think it also sort of depends on what platform you're on too. when it comes to the situations that are your de-escalating. Comment sections, obviously, you have, like, things run wild in there. Twitter tends to be it tends to kind of be easy, I think, a little bit more on Twitter, just because people don't have the length. Like, they can always tweet 15 times, but Facebook, I always find too, it's if you have a community that's primarily on there, people tend to really go crazy over there, and if your community is hosted there, because there isn't like a character limit, they really they put it all out there. So anybody else have anything?
Just wait, Dom. You will change your mind as soon as you get barraged on Twitter publicly by one person that brings an army in. You will change your opinion that it depends on the platform.
Well, yeah, like what Dave was saying, like, it takes effort, but if somebody wants to put in that effort, they could do it wherever they want to. So we sort of touched on this a couple of times, I know, when we were talking about empathy, but do you guys have any other tips for really acknowledging and accepting other people's thoughts and feelings in this? Like, what are some tips that you sort of roll through to make sure that you're really understanding them?
I think, stating it, right? I hear you, and as you said, like, maybe repeating it back to them, paraphrased, or a redacted version, that goes a long way. I think that a lot of times, if you just say, hey, why so angry? Why are you so upset? And that will, at least acknowledge that you understand that they're upset, and sometimes that'll go a long way to, bringing them back down, because suddenly they realize that somebody rational is talking to them, and in order to get their point across, they're going to have to be rational too. And just acknowledging in general is the biggest thing that you can do, whether it's verbally or written.
Yeah, I was gonna say, ask questions. So, like, why are you angry? But also, like, okay, I understand. What can I do for you right now that'll help you? What can we do to move this forward? I'm working on it, and kind of keeping them in the conversation as well. So one of the biggest things that we did, especially with Fluke, when I was working with the very public global Twitter account, was taking it, if an issue came across in public, and you're acknowledging it in public and then taking it private, and making sure you're putting them in touch with the right people and following up. So the initial thing is always to acknowledge it publicly and then take it to private when you can, as soon as you can, and put them in touch with the right people. I think that always helps, because there's no delay with it, and I mean, obviously sometimes it happens in the middle of the night, so you can't do it, but asking the right questions and then acknowledging that this is an issue that needs to be resolved for them, acknowledging it publicly, and then immediately taking it to a longer conversation privately always helps.
I think that's okay, as long as you come back to that public space and let people know it's been resolved. Because I think sometimes if we're too quick to pull it to private, people think we're trying to hide it.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
definitely keep transparency going, even if you're resolving the issue privately.
Yeah, transparency is absolutely key. But then one of the main uses of our community is to kind of deflect some of the support for our mainline customer service representatives, and there are a lot of questions that are very easily answered just by a quick search. And so if someone has a problem or something like that, and we can solve it offline, but then bringing it back in, like you're talking, Brock, allows you to get that out there in the public where it's transparent. The next person with that issue might find it on their own, and might be really happy that they don't have to get in touch with somebody directly to try to find out what the resolution is.
When I was going to say, one thing that I keep these in front of me, they're little magnets that stick together. And I always remember that the community member is this, I'm this, ultimately we want this. But a lot of times we approach it and we're stuck where we're not going to meet together. If I'm continually going with the same approach, it doesn't mean I'm going to make that contact. I'm never going to change him. I'm never going to change the environment. So if I can change my approach by flipping my approach around and bring it together, I think it's not so much a tactic, but it's something that I use. Don't continue to beat against a brick wall when all you need to do is change your approach. if they're not receiving what you're saying, even though it might have worked on the 100 people before them. Everybody's unique, and you're not going to change that other person, so change yourself in the approach that you're taking to that person.
Awesome, Tim.
He dropped the mic. If you didn't hear that, he dropped the mic.
I was gonna say, he brought props too. Like, need to bring some props. I'm giving him props for his props. How about that? There you go. All right, let's roll into question 5. And by the way, guys, if you're watching on Twitter, I know we have some other questions that are rolling in from there. Make sure you send them off so we can pull them up on screen so you can be cool, like Laura was cool. So question 5, do you guys find it difficult to step back and apologize for your contribution? Like if a situation does get escalated and then you're like, wow, we really need to take this back. Like, do you guys typically tend to do that? What are some tips to do that? To not admit all fault, but still, backtrack a little bit?
I think it's okay to apologize when it's appropriate, like to say I'm sorry. I know that a lot of people will tell you that it's not good to say you're sorry because that implies guilt, and that guilt could be a legal liability. But I think that when it's appropriate, it's okay to say I'm sorry, and it's okay to say I'm sorry you feel that way, which is somewhat of a deflection. It's not admitting anything other than, we apologize that you're having a bad experience or that you're not happy with the way things are. But I think apologies are fine. I think for a brand to say, yes, we made a mistake, and here's how we're going to fix it, goes a lot further than a brand just trying to ignore the problem or wash it under the table, Ashley Madison. So, it just depends. Saying I'm sorry, we made a mistake, and it can do wonders. Just do it in a way that's not going to get you in legal trouble.
Well, and I think too, I mean, especially when you're resolving or de-escalating a conflict, the conflict typically isn't between you and the entire community, it's with you and an individual. And so just like we were talking earlier about, a lot of times it might start online, but then you bring it offline and you might finish it online. I don't think the apology is a public-facing thing. I think it's more of a one-on-one type of conversation. If they want to share that, that's fine, but then it doesn't become, like you said, David, it doesn't become that public statement that's out there for the public to see, because it didn't come from the organization. It was just a one-on-one personal conversation, and I've had plenty of those types of conversations and have no problem at all admitting, that I apologize for how it's making them feel, and and that I understand that they don't like it, but ultimately, the decision is we need to move forward for that. So how can we together move forward in something that's going to make them a little bit more satisfied with the outcome?
One factor when it comes to apologies and dealing with and apologizing is how young or old your organization is. So if you're a startup, you're just figuring things out, you're kind of growing and being transparent in your growth, I think it's easier for you to say sorry. We're trying to figure this out. Thank you for your feedback. It's easier to do that publicly than when you're a bigger corporation and you have legal issues and PR issues and a lot of other things that are happening on the back end that you might not be able to acknowledge publicly. That makes a huge difference in how you handle apologies and acknowledgement of mistakes and how you deal with the issues that come up one-on-one. So I think it's definitely a lot easier for community managers and organizations that are brand new, they're figuring things out, and have that ability to be that transparent, because it is expected that they will make mistakes. And there are not as many stakeholders that have to deal with a public mistake. So I think that that level of management and the number of people that have to contribute to the conversation on the back end, then the bigger the number, the harder it is to manage an apology publicly and do it in the right way. So I think that's definitely a factor that, since we have so many different community managers that are watching this, it's definitely a factor for all of us across the board.
So our CEO released an apology for an incident that resulted in some downtime for a lot of our customers. And I can tell you it was absolutely crucial in de-escalating a lot of the negative sentiment that was out there. There was a lot of there were a lot of people that were upset, and we did fail some of our customers. And to see that accountability from the CEO was just a huge benefit to us that were in the community and managing that community and trying to de-escalate things. You have to have somebody to take that ultimate accountability when you do wrong, when you do something that impacts your customers like that. And it was great. We posted it in our community, of course, and then across a couple of different blog channels as well, just to make sure that that message got out there. It was it's something that we don't do often, a broad apology like that. It's it does happen though, and we had another incident when I was actually a customer of Rackspace before I started working here. There was another large incident, and the next day the CEO at that time sent out a YouTube apology. Got in front of the camera and apologized on YouTube. And it's the type of thing that you need to do to make sure that your customers know that you are dedicated to doing things right and making things right when you are wrong. Hopefully we never end up in that situation where we need to apologize, but the reality is that we do. And I think it goes a long way to de-escalating bad situations.
Yeah, Ellen, I was saying in the chat as I'm bringing in this question, I was a customer of Rackspace at that time, and I remember seeing that come through, and that you have an opportunity when you have this kind of stuff that happens. It's like you never want to be in that position, but you have an opportunity to really handle it. If you handle it well, you're going to come out looking even better than you did before there was a mistake that happened. This sort of does work into Patrick's question. Thanks a lot, Patrick, for sending in your cue. Do you guys find it important to validate angry customers' feelings, or does it come across as corny or patronizing? And I guess how can you validate it without coming across corny or patronizing? I guess is another way to frame that.
I have a question so much. I'm so happy. I actually agree that it often is extremely patronizing to say something like, "Oh, I'm so sorry you feel that way." It's like, for me, whenever anybody says that to me, I get really mad, because to me, you're saying, "I'm sorry that you're pissed, but like not really," because you're not saying, "I'm sorry this happened," or "I'm sorry I did something to make you feel like that," or "I'm sorry my company did something to make you upset." You're saying, "I'm sorry that you think this is bad, but sucks to suck," in my opinion. And I think so. I actually just went and searched. When I was working at Scoop It, we had this huge glitch on our platform one time where everyone's I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with Scoop It, but it's a content curation platform, and you can share your posts to social media. So one time, like, everyone's social media accounts got disconnected, and they had to like reconnect them, like re-enter their password, and people were emailing support like, "You guys are unbelievable, like this is completely unacceptable, this is the worst." What we did, instead of being like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry you feel that way," we were kind of just like, "Look, we know this sucks, and like there's nothing, like we wish we could have prevented it, and like now we're gonna try, and like we know you're pissed because we're pissed too, because like we're being affected by it." So I think if you're able to kind of really like don't like just be a person. I think it's so easy to like overthink these things and like try too hard to like make sure that they know you're understanding yourself, which is great. Like that's a great thing to want to achieve. But I feel like once you like overthink it way too much, then like that's when it starts sounding patronizing, instead of being like, "Yeah, look, like I am a human who like wakes up every morning and goes to my job and like crappy stuff happens, and like, yeah, it affected you, and like, we know, and here's like literally exactly what happened. We wrote this blog post that was like, here's like literally exactly what happened, why you're mad, why we're mad, and how we're gonna fix it, and that's it. And I guess my biggest piece of advice would just be like, don't overthink it.
Yeah, I think sorry, it's I think that I like to use the word I understand, and instead of I'm sorry. So it's like like one of the acknowledgments that especially like because it's so hard for me to use like say I'm sorry, I'm right there with you. Like it feels like patronizing, and it feels like it's just like, oh, I'm sorry you're feeling that way, like sucks for you. But like I understand that you're pissed. I understand that this is what you're dealing with. Like I think the understand, it's not a word that customers hear often. They do hear that I'm sorry, and they do hear that we're looking into it, but I understand that right now you are dealing with this emotion, and you are experiencing this horrible, awful thing, whether it's a glitch, whether it's your website being down, whatever it is. So think about the way, like, I'm also a writer, so I also think about linguistically. Like, think about how a word would make you feel in that situation if you heard it, and it's the empathy part of it as well. But kind of think about the language you're using, and maybe if you don't want to say I'm sorry all the time, think about different ways that you can get that point across without using the word sorry and apologizing or making them feel patronized.
And I also think it really can be unique to the situation. Like, I can share, I actually was on the other side of this just this morning with Pottery Barn, and I had like these issues with my Pottery Barn card and all this, and I was just like, look, I'm not happy, I'm pissed, and I just want to close my account. And like, I didn't want to hear from her. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry, let's take care of that right away, I will blah. And like, it was like a script, feeling like I don't want this, like, I don't believe you, I don't believe that you care, and like, that's fine, just like, I need you to solve this problem. And I feel like sometimes we can get so carried away with like, thinking about what to say and everything like that, that it can be easy to like lose sight of actually solving the problem. And I think like ultimately that's what you need to do. Like for me, I just wanted my Pottery Barn account closed. Like that's I don't want you to like tell me how like I don't know. I don't know. It goes, I guess it's the same theme of like, don't overthink it, but just like solve the problem. I don't know.
Well, I think, Ellie, I mean, exactly what you were kind of saying. It's don't read a script. Be human. I mean, and understand the person. Don't get hung up on the exact word that you're using as much as how you're coming across to that person, how you're making them feel, how they're responding to you. And it just doesn't get into conflict resolution. It gets into selling. It gets into just normal conversations. If we're not human about it, people don't care about it, and we lose the effect of what we're trying to actually create. So I think the biggest thing is forget about the script and just be human.
It's that Discover card thing, right? It's that Discover card, like, we treat you like you'd treat you. Like that's the way you really need to look at it. It's just I was on the phone with there was an issue with my cable. I've been gone for a while, and I came back, and Time Warner like shut off all my stuff. I'm like, kind of important. I needed a little bit to work, and like it got solved, and then it was the same problem the next day. You know what? I do pay my bills. Thank you very much, Allie. But it happened the next day, and I called the guy in the morning. I was like, I wake up and I want to watch my Sports Center, and I don't have it, and it's kind of rough. And he literally said to me, he was like, that's the worst. Let's figure out what we can do. And I was like, awesome. Yeah, like that's good. Like cable companies are the bane of people's existence, having to make that phone call. But if I wasn't happy, and so there was a conflict there, and he made a good way of de-escalating it. All right, we have about 8 minutes, so I want to get to this question here because I think that it's pretty good. From Constance, how do you analyze expectations from the community? So when it comes into the realm of thinking of this, from expectations and how that can really help when it comes to de-escalating situations, how do you guys really analyze those expectations?
I don't know if, I mean, they're going to make it known. I don't know. You mean like ahead of
I
time?
think
Like,
I think you have to create the expectations. That's what I think.
well, you can manage expectations for sure. But just know that even if you manage them, somebody's going to be pissed if you make changes in the
But
community.
right, of course. But if you are managing expectations, it's easier for you to go back and be like, look, this is the rule. Like, this is what I said. This is what's going to happen. And I know it's like obviously not that
Yeah,
easy,
you
but
said it,
like,
but I didn't read it, Allie. I still don't like these changes. I'm
right.
just
But that's the
telling you.
thing. Like, even if I have to tell you like 100 more times, like it's in writing. I told you that this is what that I wasn't gonna be picking up your phone calls at 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning. So I don't know. I feel like managing expectations at the beginning is like super important. Anyone who's heard me talk before knows that I used to struggle with this a lot and learned a lot about how useful managing expectations could be. I think the more control you have over it, the better off you're going to be ultimately.
I mean, I think you can always just ask, right? And say, hey, what are your expectations? I spent a lot of my career in onboarding and in customer success, and that's one of the things that, if you just say, what do you want to get out of this? You get a really good response back, and you can really understand what they are. With the community, it's a little difficult, a little more difficult to get that accurate gauge because you're looking at multiple people that make up that community, multiple B2B or B2C. I mean, you're looking at multiple people. So let's figure out what what they are. Maybe take a baseline and try to in a community try to find something that benefits the most people.
Well, as we're talking about, expectations and what people were thinking before of what should happen, that sort of leads us right into, number 6, and that's, sort of focusing on the future. How do you guys use that? How can you really focus on the future to help de-escalate escalate conflict? Is that a thing you guys do?
I think it kind
That's
of
a
goes
really
back.
tough conversation. Oh, go on, Mark.
I don't know. I was just gonna say. I think it goes back to what I was kind of saying earlier about using like the listening of what happened with a past event or a past escalation or a past issue, and then kind of anticipating that. So I think and learning from it. So if it's a completely unexpected issue that you didn't even expect, especially if your community is new or you have issues come up that you didn't anticipate coming up because you didn't think that would be an issue for your members. It's a huge learning process, right? So you want to get back with your team after the issue has been handled and be like, okay, we didn't anticipate this, but here's how we handled it. Here's what we did right. Here's what we did wrong. Let's come up with language if we need to deal with it in the future, and let's come up with a kind of an escalation chart of like how, who we're going to take this to, who's the first person to handle it, how do we handle it. So I think learning from it and things, it's so interesting. Like I've been doing community management for 6 years. I've dealt with different communities, and the things that come up with the issues that come up that you couldn't even anticipate would come up in your community, it's like a learning process. So you just have to remember that, and just remember it, like treat it as a learning process, and always do kind of a postmortem. And just in case an issue comes up that you would not anticipate. And then there are the things that are expected, like a new product, a new change, whatever it is. But just have your team ready to deal with things and learn from experiences. And we're all learning. Human behavior is unpredictable, so we're all learning about like a community member that might come in and completely rock our world with an issue that we didn't expect. And we have to deal with it.
What's interesting about being a community manager is that you have sometimes a parallel track. While something is going wrong for customers, right, you might have customer support that's trying to correct that problem that's happening. But at the same time, like, you might not have access to the system. You might not have the technical skill to resolve the problem, but you can definitely take an eye to the future and you can assure, hey, we are working on this issue. In the meantime, let's try to figure out why this, was the most impactful to you. What can we do to prevent that if something like this should happen again, or to get you back, in better shape than you were before this issue happened? And just try to find a way to take this in a parallel track. The main thing is to make sure that you are assuring them that the issue is being resolved. But then if you can find a way to kind of parallel track a proactive approach to preventing or to minimizing the impact of a similar instance down the road, that's a good thing you can do for your community.
And that's one of the great things about the future. It's literally open to whatever. And I think it's a great tool of one of those, using it as a way of saying, hey, things weren't good. We understand that. This is what we're trying to do, and we want it to be better. Because then you're taking it and you're turning a conflict into an opportunity. With that one person who could potentially be turn into an advocate for your brand, an advocate in your community of saying, hey, help us fix this. We thank you for bringing it to our attention. We want to, and in a more human way, Allie. Not that just sounded very robotic there, but as like, hey, here's where we messed up. This is help us work in the future, have a part of it, and then they feel like they've helped. They have just the same way that we've talked about wanting to get involvement in in your community and having them buy in and help build it from scratch, and then highlighting that because this is a success that a lot of times people want to steer away from conflict after it's done, but if you do it well, you can point back to it and be like, hey, you might be upset now, but so was this person, and we helped work on it, so this is how we're going to help work it for you. And there you go. So, all right, question 7. I think if everybody wants to go really, really quick, if you have a short tip on handling difficult conversations. If you have to, let's go tweet length. Here's your chance to be tweetable. Ready, go.
Be helpful.
Don't overthink it.
Remember to breathe.
David, Tim?
Be the magnet.
You want me to squeeze it into 140 characters?
Everybody else is doing it.
Everybody else
am for
is doing
both.
it. We still have room in 140.
Said like 3 words apiece.
I was going to say, you could use all their extra characters that they left you.
That's over. We could have
I
put
was
the whole
going to say,
thing.
if I can fit something into 3 words, then anybody can.
Just listen. There you go. Listen first. That's what it should be. Listen first.
There we go. All right. All right. Wonderful, guys. Well, thanks a lot. This was really, really awesome. I'm glad that everybody was here. And next week, we are talking about, let me actually look. Normally I throw this part to Sherry, and then she says it. It's interviewing the company is next week. So that's going to be really awesome. I know we have a great panel set up for that. I mean, these are all awesome. You guys are awesome. All right, cool. Well, that's the end of that. Hope you guys have a great Friday. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thanks for having me.